The rumors connecting Pete Alonso to the Toronto Blue Jays are picking up, but is there any merit to all of this talk? I'm going to break down why you shouldn't believe everything you're hearing on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, today there was a lot of speculation about Pete Alonso and the Toronto Blue Jays. There also was a signing that is very important to the Mets division, the Mets and the Blue Jays, because both the Mets and the Blue Jays had rumored interest in Jurickson Profar, but Jurickson Profar is instead signing a 3-year, $42 million deal with the Atlanta Braves. Now, this is an average annual value of $14 million. You could say that's a steal for Profar, but going into the offseason, I predicted that Profar would land back with the Padres on a 3-year, $45 million deal. So I don't think this was a crazy steal for the Braves, but it is a good value contract. There is some risk taking on Profar for 3 years, but in this market with what was left, this is a great move for the Braves to fortify an outfield that has a lot of question marks because, yes, you do have a great center fielder in Michael Harris II. You do have Ronald Acuna Jr. due to come back at some point this season coming off that torn ACL. But beyond that, you're looking at Brian De La Cruz and Jared Kelenic. So now those two guys compete for a spot in right field to start the season. They bring on Profar to be their left fielder. Once Acuna is ready, those two guys get pushed to the bench. This makes the Braves a lot better. And it also takes away a safety net where the Mets now don't have another free agent bat to fill first base. I talked about this on yesterday's show, how Profar really was the only other free agent that made any sense to be a starting player for the Mets next year outside of Alonso, because I still don't believe the Mets are going to get in on Alex Bregman. So with that said, now it really is just down to Pete Alonso and a lot of bad options, which if you want to hear about those more, you can check out yesterday's show. The Blue Jays were reportedly in on either Profar or Alonso to add one more bat to their lineup, and they wanted to pair that signing with Max Scherzer. And throughout the day, we had a lot of people on social media guessing, but calling it reporting, saying that the talks had picked up between the Toronto Blue Jays and Pete Alonso. And Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer are heading to the Blue Jays in some sort of a package deal. This is all the talk. Pete Alonso is going to get a 3-year, $75 million deal from Toronto, which is absolutely guessing. It's taking the money that was reported that the Mets had offered, $70 million, throwing a little extra on top, nice round number. You put it out there as a report. We're hearing that it's X, Y, and Z. No one's really hearing it. None of these people have real sources. There's some that do, and the most credible report we got throughout the day on this came from Andy Martino. And his report was that talks between Pete Alonso and the Blue Jays are, quote, advancing, per a source with knowledge. Not done yet. No guarantee that it gets there. That was Martino's report. And when you heard him talk about an SNY, it became pretty clear from my vantage point that he got that from Scott Boras, because he says, I'm hearing they're at the 10-yard line. And then he went on to say, these are all metaphors. Who speaks in metaphors? Who speaks with puns and metaphors whenever we hear him in front of a mic? Scott Boras. And he has used that 10-yard line thing countless times over the years. So it's at the 10-yard line, right? That's what Andy Martino would lead us to believe. That's what he's hearing from Scott Boras or someone close to Scott Boras. And that's to get this out there. Where? On SNY. Because a week ago, the Mets made their move on SNY with their report to Martino. So now Boras is trying to use the Mets mouthpiece, put it out there that, hey, the Blue Jays and Pete Alonso, they're close. They're real close. Well, there's other reporters that talk directly to the Blue Jays. And this is where you have to get credible information. And we got some from Ben Nicholson-Smith and Shai Davidi, who both work for Sportsnet. These guys pretty much have a direct line to the Blue Jays front office. So what they say when it comes to the Blue Jays is real. It's accurate. Here's what they said about all this talk when it came to Pete Alonso. This is from Ben Nicholson-Smith. Lots out there today. Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer could be fits for the Blue Jays in time. But sources tell Shai Davidi and me that there's no momentum toward a deal on either player right now. Wouldn't be accurate to say talks are progressing. He continued to say, further clarifying, excuse me, that was just my note here. So he further clarified, and this is what he said in the next tweet. Any competitive team would want Alonso and Scherzer. Jays do like those players. Just to characterize anything as progressing or gaining momentum or close is not accurate based on the conversations Shai Davidi and I had today. So the Blue Jays front office is saying, we like them, but it's not getting close. All the smoke that was out there about Pete Alonso and the Blue Jays today, it was to try to force action from the Mets. Because what does Pete Alonso want at the end of all of this? To be a New York Met. What do the New York Mets want out of all of this? You can say they don't really want Pete. I believe they do want Pete Alonso, because otherwise I don't think their fallback this entire time would be Brett Beatty. I don't think they would watch Jurickson Profar go to the Braves for $42 million and not try to get in on that. But then again, Profar is a Boras client, and this seems like a perfect situation where you get an offer from the Braves that's solid. Instead of trying to squeeze every dollar out for Jurickson Profar, a guy that doesn't have the star talent, you're not going to be judged. Oh, well, he might have star talent, but he doesn't have the star profile. So you got to remember how much ego Scott Boras has. And in this instance, he's not judged on what Jurickson Profar signs for. No one's going to say, oh, Profar sure got 50. And if they do say it, they're not saying it loudly. So, hey, Jurickson, you want to go play for the Braves on a really good team for the next 3 years? Sign me up, absolutely. I'm done with this free agent thing. Boom. All right, he's out for the Blue Jays. He's out for the Mets, right? So now, neither of these teams has another leg to stand on but to get Pete Alonso. Scott Boras hopes that drives a bidding war. And he's going to make it seem like that's happening right now. But in reality, the Blue Jays have some bigger things to think about, and that is a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extension. They have a luxury tax to worry about, which we're going to talk about in the next segment. And they finally landed somebody, Anthony Santander, in a contract that we're going to talk about in this next segment here that has a ton of deferred money. What is the Blue Jays' current situation with their payroll? Can they actually add both Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer? I'm going to explain why that's doubtful in the next segment. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Select Quote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl or the World Series. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets Select Quote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million with no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. Select Quote. They shop, you save. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button Our next goal is to get to 13,000 subscribers. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Now, Anthony Santander's contract details with the Toronto Blue Jays came out today, and they were fascinating. And they were reported on by Shai Davidi of Sportsnet, the same reporter or one of the two reporters from Sportsnet that threw that cold water on all the buzz about a Pete Alonso to the Blue Jays deal getting close. Again, he is credible. He is locked in. It has a line to that front office. So here are the details. The net present day value of Anthony Santander's 5-year contract is less than $70 million. It's $68.6 million, which comes out to an average annual value for the luxury tax of $13.7 million, which is very important because that knocks their salary collectively when it comes to luxury tax under $261 million. So that keeps them from the second threshold where you start paying additional penalties. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, but breaking down the details of the contract because it's insane. Almost $62 million is deferred. So he gets a $13.5 million signing bonus, but he's only collecting half of that now. Half of that's deferred. He gets $13.5 million in salary in 2025. $10 million of that is deferred. So he's only making $3.5 million this year of what he's actually getting paid with the $6.75 million bonus, signing bonus. 2026 and 2027, he gets $16.5 million, $10 million deferred each year, and then it's 14.75 and 12.75 in the final 2 years of the deal. Again, $10 million deferred each year. A $15 million club option for 2030 that has a guaranteed $5 million buyout, which is also deferred. So to break down the entire deal in layman's terms, Anthony Santander is guaranteed $60 million over the first 3 years of the deal if he then chooses to opt out after it. But of that money, only $23.25 million is he going to actually get over the next 3 years. That's including his signing bonus and his salary for the next 3 seasons. $36.75 million of the $60 million he will earn across the first 3 years of this deal is deferred. So a ton of deferred money. If he opts in, there's $32.5 million over the final 2 years that's guaranteed. $25 million of that is deferred. $5 million of that $25 million is the buyout on the $15 million club option. Bottom line, if he opts out, they opt in, everything vests, you're looking at $110 million overall across 6 years. But again, over $60 million of that is deferred. This team that just deferred that much money because they're that concerned about the luxury tax is the one that is now going to sign both Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer. I'm calling BS on that. And when you look at the luxury tax implications, if you go to Spot Track, I talked about this on the weekend show I did. Are the Mets bluffing or do they have a budget? You should check that out. I really broke down the luxury tax and the implications on the Mets and why they don't want to just overpay Pete Alonso for the sake of it, just to end this nightmare of a ongoing saga. But when it relates to where the Blue Jays are at, Spot Track has them at $245 million, not factoring in the deferred money. If you do, it would take them under the initial luxury tax threshold. But Fangraphs roster resource I found might be a little more accurate here. And the reason I found that is because when a team acquires a player, and the Blue Jays just did that with Andres Gimenez, their luxury tax average annual value is computed by what the new team takes on, not the original deal. So in the original deal for Andres Gimenez, his luxury tax payroll is around $15 million. Now it's closer to $20 million because it was a backloaded contract that they inherited. So based on Fangraphs roster resource, and that is what Shai Davidi cited in his Sportsnet article breaking down Santander's contract, he's saying the Blue Jays are just under $261 million. So they are instead pushing up against that second threshold. What does that mean? Right now, as a first-time tax offender, they are getting taxed 20% on everything they pay over $241 million. So let's say right now, when it's all said and done, their luxury tax payroll is $259 million, $18 million over the tax. They're getting taxed at about $3.6 million. If they clear $261 million, they start to get taxed with an additional surcharge of 12%. So everything over $261 million gets taxed at a 32% rate. If they clear it by $40 million, so if they get past $281 million, all of a sudden that surcharge spikes to $62.5 million on every dollar over. And then if they go even further than that and they actually clear the final tax threshold, then you're looking at 80% on every dollar spent over $301 million. The one time, as I noted on that show that I just talked about over the weekend, are the Mets bluffing? And I talked about the luxury tax implications. I was going through the Blue Jays numbers and if they've ever been a luxury tax team. It happened one time, 2023. They were nearly $19 million over, just below that second threshold, which is exactly where they are at right now. They paid a tax bill that time of about $5.5 million. So, with all of that said, are they really going to sign Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer and extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Or is their number one objective right now extending Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? And if Pete Alonso and Max Scherzer are still on the block, they're still available to be signed. When we get to February 18th, the deadline that Vladdy set to get a contract extension signed, or if they're still there after they hammer out that deal with Vladdy, maybe then to bolster the roster for this year, they will sign those guys. But I don't think right now priority number one for the Toronto Blue Jays is signing Pete Alonso. I think they just did the big deal that they wanted to get another bat to show Vladdy they're committed to winning. And now they're going to try to pay him a bunch of money to keep him. And then at that time, whether they sign him or not, they can explore signing these guys. I want to talk about where that would put them and then how the Mets factor into all of this again in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and there's a variety of bets to keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, so no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has got you covered. They also got NBA action going on right now, and you can check out MLB futures. Maybe you believe that Juan Soto is going to win the MVP. You can find that over at FanDuel. You can also look at the Mets World Series odds. All that is available to you. And again, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's just say the Toronto Blue Jays have a luxury tax payroll right now of $259 million. So they're $18 million over the tax. Max Scherzer just saw Justin Verlander get $15 million to go pitch for the Giants. And he's coming off a worse year, Verlander is, than what Max Scherzer just did. Both of them are hurt. But when Scherzer was on the mound, he was effective in an ERA in the high threes. Verlander's ERA was over 5. So Max Scherzer is going to look at Verlander's contract and say, I better get at least that. If I'm going to pitch, I better get at least $15 million. Also, he's looking at the market. And everyone's getting $15 million as a good starting pitcher. So expect him to get at least 15. Maybe in the right situation where it's the perfect team that he thinks he can win with. Maybe him and Pete Alonso are besties. And it was clear when Alonso and Scherzer played together that there was a connection there. And Alonso spoke about it after Scherzer got traded. They were really good friends. And I really think the reason that Pete Alonso is represented by Scott Boras right now is because of Max Scherzer. I wouldn't even be surprised if Max Scherzer was in Pete's ear and was part of the poor advice he got in turning down that contract extension the Mets gave him that June, because Max Scherzer has long been a major force in the MLBPA. I think now he's taking a step back from it, but he was for a very long time. And a huge part of the MLBPA is getting to the open market and testing your value so you help out the guy behind you. So I think the Scherzer-Alonso relationship is fascinating on multiple fronts. But the fact that it's now connected to the Blue Jays is really interesting. If they sign Scherzer for $15 million, that would push their salary up to $274 million when it comes to luxury tax. Pete Alonso reportedly got that offer in the $70 million range. And Anthony wrong Anthony. Wrong reporter altogether. Jeez, Anthony. Andy Martino on SNY tonight also had another interesting tidbit about the Pete Alonso situation. So he was talking about that reported contract offer, that range of $68 to $70 million. He says the Mets had deferred money in that deal, so the present day value was $68 to $70 million. But the actual value, and he wouldn't commit to how much it was over $70 million. So let's just say the Mets, similar to what the Blue Jays just did with Santander, maybe they put $80 million in front of Pete, but a certain amount of it was deferred. I can't do that math for you on the fly. Say $25 million of that was deferred. Actually, the perfect example is the Sean Manaea contract. Sean Manaea got $75 million from the Mets. 23.25 of that was deferred. That took the present day value more into the $66 million range. So perfect comp. So let's just say it's 80 and it's $26 million deferred, something in that range. If that's the offer that was on the table, how are the Blue Jays going to top that? Are the Blue Jays really the team to go that far in? Because let's just say present day value, you're landing him at the same amount, and we're going to call it $23 million. Well, you're already at $274 million. If you now add $23 million on top of it, you are pushing up against the Steve Cohen tax line. You're at $297 million. And if it takes $75 million of present day value to get Pete Alonso to sign with the Blue Jays, at that point, you're pretty much on top of it. You're at $299 million with Scherzer. Now, they could just sign Pete, no Scherzer. But let's just say you extend Vladdy. Again, depending on what that contract looks like, you could be pushing up against that top threshold. And this is a team that has never gone past the second threshold, and they've only gone past the luxury tax line one time. So now we believe that they're the team that's going to go to a $300 million payroll. Yes, they have all the money in the world with their ownership group, but they also run this team for profit. They're not trying to take serious losses. Hey, if you can do it for a year and you get Vladdy locked up for a decade plus, maybe it's worth it. But until that deal is signed, who knows if it makes sense to do it. And if it's not signed, well, now, is Pete Alonso happy to wait until spring training to get signed? Is Max Scherzer happy to wait until spring training to get signed? And if you do decide to bring those two guys in without extending Vladdy, you're pretty much just last-ditch effort trying to win in 2025 with Vladdy. If it doesn't work, you're trading Vladdy at the deadline, and Pete Alonso is now your first baseman in his place next year, assuming he doesn't opt out. And if he does opt out and you traded Vladdy, then you're left with what? Anthony Santander and George Springer? Tough place to be in. They might be in that situation anyway, but why are they going to even give opt-outs to Pete? I think if anything, they'd probably prefer to have a contract like they just signed with Anthony Santander, where at least they know, all right, well, yeah, if we lose Vladdy and Bo Bichette, at least we have Santander and Pete Alonso to start a rebuild around. It doesn't add up. It doesn't. Could it happen? Absolutely. It could happen. But all of this is a bunch of smoke being thrown out there as Scott Boras was backed into a corner and he's got too much of an ego to just cave and get out of it by taking care of his client, which is his job. But it's not about taking care of Pete Alonso or taking care of Alex Bregman, who apparently the Astros today let out their Chandler Rome, who is plugged into the Astros. Solid reporting. Seems like this is coming from them. They said, you know what? Yeah, we added Isaac Paredes. We added Christian Walker. We'd love to have Alex Bregman back still. We'd keep Bregman at third. We would move Paredes to second. And guess what? Hall of Famer Jose Altuve is going to slide into left field because our outfield sucks. They didn't say that last part. I did. But they're apparently still in. And they're not even backing down the contract offer. Because guess what? They put together a very fair contract for Alex Bregman. Is it 7 years? Is it 8 years? No. It's a 6-year deal, $26 million per season, $156 million. That's fair value. Pete Alonso, you could say, well, fair value for him is $100 million. If no one bids on him, fair value is the one contract offer that he has, and that's from the New York Mets. And when you see what Anthony Santander got, when you see what Jurickson Profar got, when it comes to average annual value, the Mets giving Pete Alonso $23 million per year in present day value is more than fair, because it's also better than what Christian Walker got, which I imagine is how they came to that number. You're better than Christian Walker, but you're not $10 million a year better than Christian Walker. The more this situation drags out, the more you can get frustrated with Scott Boras and his handling of this. And obviously, a lot of this started there, but I was giving the Mets a little bit of flack because, yes, at the end of the day, what we can't ignore is what's probably been guiding Scott Boras throughout all of this time, which is at some point, Steve Cohen is going to say, screw the sideshow. I don't care. Give me Pete Alonso. But again, Andy Martino said on SNY tonight, one more time to reiterate, Steve Cohen's not doing that. This is David Stern's negotiation, and David Stearns has Scott Boras right where he wants him. The only thing that stops Pete Alonso from coming back to the New York Mets is Scott Boras and his ego. I think it's even beyond Pete. I really do. I don't know if Pete Alonso has enough hurt feelings over this that he wants to play somewhere else. I really don't think so. I don't think that Pete Alonso wants to be a part-time first baseman, part-time DH with Vladdy. Be second fiddle behind Vladdy in Toronto. Go live in Toronto. Pay more taxes on a contract that's probably going to be the same value, or when you factor in the taxes, maybe worse. I don't see it. And that's where all roads have always led to the Mets and Pete Alonso coming to terms on something. But Scott Boras has to get out of the way. And all of this smoke and mirrors and noise and rumblings and reports and talks are advancing. They're at the 10-yard line. And then Andy Martino says, but I've seen a lot of things in my career where the 10-yard line doesn't happen. You throw a pick six at the 10-yard line, and David Stearns runs it back the other way. It's ridiculous, this whole thing. It's so beyond frustrating. I went from a week ago when all this drama started being just upset and sad. And they're like, man, come on. Pete's not going to be a Met. Pete's not going to get to be a part of this team with Juan Soto. And there's still that side of it where it is still frustrating. And you wish, all right, whatever. If you had an offer on the table for $80 million, defer $10 million more of it and tack on some more money, like do whatever, like get to $90 million and defer half of it. Do the Anthony Santander thing, just screw it. Just whatever. Like it's all monopoly money anyway, especially for Steve Cohen. But if you're David Stearns, you can't just cave. You can't, because at the end of the day, there's no other offers for Pete Alonso. Shai Davidi and Ben Nicholson Smith said as much. Hope I got Ben's name right on that one. But those guys who report for the Blue Jays, they made it clear, like they are not at the offer stage of negotiations. They're expressing interest. Hey, if he comes to the right price, sure. Here's the thing about all of this, and I had a long thread that I tweeted out today about this whole situation, my take on it. The New York Mets have a very clear strategy when it comes to retaining their free agents since Steve Cohen took over. We're not going to bid against ourselves. Go out into the market, find out what your market value is, and we would love to meet that market value and sign you. Edwin Diaz, I mean, that was a different situation. Diaz wanted a deal done with only the Mets, and they got that deal done. But Brandon Nimmo went out to the market, found out what his market value was. He re-signed. Jacob deGrom went out to the market. The Rangers overpaid. The Mets said no thanks if they even got an opportunity to, because deGrom might have just wanted out. Then it comes to Sean Manaea this year. Goes out into the market, doesn't get any offers other than the Sacramento A's, who, it's always funny to say that now, gave him a 3-year deal worth $67 million. He said no. They gave that exact offer to Luis Severino. He signed it. Manaea signs with the Mets, 3 years, $75 million. The deferred money, take that value right to the market value that was shown from the A's of about $67 million. What the Mets tried to do in this process was let Pete go on the market, find your value, and we'll come to terms on a fair deal. There was no market for Pete, so it was tough to find a value. I'm sure at some point, maybe the first offer was from the Boras side of things. Hey, we'll do 3 for 90, opt-outs, you in? And the Mets said, well, no, we don't want to pay Pete Alonso $61 million this season, or have the cost of Pete Alonso be $61 million. Again, if you want more explanation on that, go back and watch that episode about the Mets bluffing, about their budget, but that was the difference in cost. We want him at $23 million per season because that is his market. He's a little bit better than Christian Walker. That's what's fair. Scott Boras, hims and haws. The Mets say, we're not moving. You don't have anyone else on the table. We're not moving. This is a fair offer for Pete. Scott says no, and the Mets do their PR stunt, stake their claim, and this is what we're doing. And it's a waiting game to see if they do anything otherwise. And it could end up with Brett Beatty being the third baseman for the New York Mets next year on opening day. And if it does, I don't think it's David Stern's fault. I think it's Scott Boras' fault. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. If we get more of this drama tomorrow, hey, or today as you guys are listening to this, I'll come on and do another weekend show. Otherwise, I'll likely see you all on Monday. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. You can follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel covering everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.